band name isn't just a label that you slap across social media. It's your identity. It's what you're going to be known as. And if you do things right, it's what people are going to be chanting before you get on stage. It's what they're going to be yelling at you across the street. It'll be on the t-shirts you sell and the albums you write. Your band name is such a crucial, integral, powerful part of branding your music. In some cases, the band name will become an identity within its own right. That's why you get people who have never heard of Kurt Cobain wearing Nirvana t-shirts. I've been in a bunch of bands over the years, and I'm starting a brand new project from scratch, and I'm releasing all the music under a band name, and that band name is Gods and Graves. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the technique that I use to come up with this band name, and it's a technique that I believe will work for any band and any genre. So if you're struggling to settle on a band name, then this is the video for you. Before I do anything when it comes to branding my music, is I try and think, what is the purpose of creating this? What is the point of it? What am I trying to achieve with this? Well, in my mind, a band name is about being recognizable. It's about people being able to find and search for you online and follow you and build your audience that way. It's also about the ability of being recognized on posters and adverts. When people are talking about a band name and you want them to know what band they're referring to. And I want it to be able to say a little bit about the band. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, I want a band name that when you hear it and when you see the logo attached to it, I want someone who's seeing that for the first time to be able to tell what kind of band it is, for it to say something about the band, because that's going to attract the right kind of following, the right kind of crowd, and intrigue the people who it's meant for. So if we take these two examples, you can almost smell the genre. You've got Metallica. And it doesn't even matter how I say it, Metallica. When I look at the word Metallica, I think blood, sweat, and metal. When I look at the words Little Mix, I think perfume and pop. Maybe some flowers thrown in there too. As a little side note to logos, you do tend to find with heavier bands in the rock and metal genres that they are more angular and kind of spiky looking. They have a lot of straight lines and sharp edges. Take Metallica, Anthrax, AC/DC, Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Linkin Park. They all tend to have these sharp, jagged edges, kind of spiky looking. And so subconsciously, when you look at a logo that's more angular, more spiky looking, you do tend to lean towards thinking it's a heavier genre. Whereas in pop, you tend to find more curves and more typography that looks like it's handwritten. So like Little Mix, One Direction, Ed Sheeran, there's a lot more curves in there. So we want the name and the logo to reflect the music. Now with this in mind, I always start with the feeling that I want my music to give the audience, the listener. And so to start with this technique of coming up with a band name, I start to think of words that encompass the feeling that I'm trying to portray. And this does take a little bit of creativity and a little bit of thinking outside the box. But say I wanted my music to be strong. That's the vibe I want to get across. I'll try to think of as many words as I can that portray strength. So power, tower, mighty, giants, empire, bold, brave, knight, warrior. So you start with a vibe and then you let your thoughts unravel, and I just try and think of as many words as I can possibly come up with off the top of my head. Using these words, I would then couple together a couple of the words to come up with this band name. So using the words I've just come up with off the top of my head, I'm thinking the brave and the bold, or power tower, empire of the giants. You see how I'm coming up with words that encompass a feeling, and then we're piecing them together to come up with a combination that we think is cool and that suits the music. If the music was spooky, I would start with different words like eerie, midnight, spells, sorcery, mystery, blood-curdling, screams. So you get the picture. You start with a feeling and then you follow that feeling to find words that encompass the feeling. Now once I've done this exercise and I've come up with a combination that I quite like, and bearing in mind you can use more than one word, often it's quite difficult to find a band name which only has one word in it nowadays because there are so many bands out there, and you might want to conjoin them with words like and the, or of the, or in the, or at the. you know, Panic at the Disco. If you like contrast, you might pick two words that completely contrast each other and jam them together. Again, Panic at the Disco is also a good example of that. So once you've done this exercise and come up with a combination you like, then I would head to Google and I'd type in the combination that you've come up with. Now, sometimes you will have to change the order of things or use different conjoining words to come up with something entirely unique to yourself. I also would Google the phrase and then band afterwards, because if a band does exist with it, sometimes it won't come up unless you put band in afterwards, because, you know, there's a lot of double meanings with things. If nothing comes up, then I go to social media and I search for pages, specifically Facebook. I look for Facebook pages. I go on Instagram, I see if the handle's being used there. And then I go to Spotify and I look for the band name in Spotify, because if someone's creating music under that name, it will likely come up. Now, sometimes if you find something that does match what you've come up with, it might take a bit of jiggling around of the words. For example, my band name is Gods and Graves, but there are bands out there called Gods in Graves, Graves of Gods, and Graves for Gods. But luckily they're not Gods and Graves, and sometimes switching the words around, using different conjoining words can be the difference between you having something that gets mixed up with someone else's band name and you getting into potentially some legal pickles down the road, or finding something entirely unique to yourself, which I would recommend. Now, I have 3 rules that I've come up with when coming up with a band name, and I call them the 3 S's. I want it to be searchable, spellable, and shareable. What I mean by searchable is I want it to be unique. If we think back to the beginning of this video when I said, what's the purpose? Well, one of the purposes is that people will be able to search you and find you, and that when someone's talking about a band, that they know that they're talking about the same band. That's quite important. The name is what differentiates you from every other band out there, so it is a big part of the branding, so you do want something unique. So I want it to be that if someone searches for my band, that my band comes up. And that makes it easy for them to follow the band and not lose interest, not get sidetracked. You know, I want them to be able to search the band, my band come up, then be able to follow, and it just be a very simple process. I also want it to be spellable, and I'm already thinking of bands in my head that are spelled in funny ways. For instance, Paris has a V instead of an A. So some bands get away with changing the spelling, but whatever the spelling is, I want it to be really clear to be able to convey to an audience. And whether that means having a banner with my band logo on it throughout all my performances so that you can see the band name, or for me to be able to relay it to an audience by saying it. Even if that means I've spelt it differently and I have to spell it out to that audience. The easier it is for them to spell once I say it, the easier it is for them to search it and find it. If you do have an alternative spelling for a band, you have to make it very clear what that is, especially at the beginning stages of being in a band, because you're trying to build up that traffic. If your band is new, it might not necessarily come up straight away in search, and especially it won't come up if you spelled it differently and you're not telling people that it's spelled in a different way. Therefore, I do like to keep things to traditional spellings where I can. But if you can't, and the only way for you to get a band name that you love is to change the spelling, you just have to be super clear about it. And the last thing is I want it to be shareable. So I want to be able to relay it to an audience, for them to be able to share it with other people, and it be a very clear thing to be able to portray to other people. So I'm thinking I want it to be easy to pronounce. When you're in a loud room and there's lots of noise, I want people to be able to hear it and know what I've said. And for them to be able to share it with other people in a very easy way. And I don't want it to get confused or mixed up with other things if I can help it. And here's another thing which I could rant about until the day is over, and that is that if I've got a logo, which I mean is part of the name, it's how you're going to display your name, I want to be able to read it. And I see so many new heavy metal bands in particular who have bands that are illegible. You can't read it. It doesn't matter how big they blow it up. They put it on a t-shirt. It's not doing any promotion because you can't see it, you can't read it, you don't know what the words actually say. It just looks like a bunch of squiggles on a background. And you will see with the biggest rock and metal bands in the world is that their logos are still rock and roll, but they're very easy to read, because otherwise it's just a wasted opportunity on your merch to promote the band. If you can't read it, if people can't read it, then the merch is not doing the promotion that it could do, and essentially it means a smaller audience for you in the long run. It might be a small thing, but it has a big impact in my opinion. All the rock and metal bands that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, all of them are really easy to read, and yet they're still edgy, they're still rock and roll. And I think in the long run, that helps your band to be recognizable. You see a logo, you can read it from however far back you are in a crowd, you know you're at the right gig. And these are rules that I stick to, the 3 S's, because especially when you're at the beginning of building a band, they are going to help you out. They're going to help you build this audience if you make it as easy as possible for people who have seen you to go, yeah, I like them. I can find them really easily. I recognize them. I know who they are. I've been able to follow them on all their socials because it's really clear and I found them really quickly.